Good evening, brethren. Our story this evening is about a pioneer who was born 225 years ago, and he died 145 years ago. Many of you will recognize his face, Mr. Captain Joseph Bates. He was born on July the 8th, 1792, and died on March the 19th, 1872, at the ripe old age of 80. And he died a year after his wife died. Fairhaven, Massachusetts is a quiet little city across a river from the old whaling town of New Branford. To this New England community came the parents of Joseph Bates to settle on a little farm when Joseph was an infant. Here, the future church pioneer spent his childhood. Here, the love of the sea penetrated his blood, and at the age of 15 years old, he shipped on to a commercial vessel, and for the next 21 years lived the life of a sailor. Okay, Bates returned to civilization, to a civilian life, in 1828 with a small fortune of $11,000. That was a fortune back then. He became involved in the abolitionist cause and was known as a man of courage and conviction. Bates was working to develop a property for an industrial school when he accepted the William Miller views on the speedy advent of Christ. Within a year or so, the retired sea captain became a respected evangelist and spiritual leader among the Adventists. So let's go. We're going to another page, page here. Now, Mr. Bates, whatever Captain Bates did, he did well. He was no half-hearted worker. When he served as a sea captain, he determined to be the most efficient skipper that sailed the 7 seas. When he discarded tobacco and alcohol beverages, he gave them up forever. And he did all of this. He became even a vegetarian before he accepted even the William Miller message and began to preach the advent of Christ. He put all his money, all 11,000, and all of his heart into his preaching. And when he saw the light on the Sabbath, on the 4th commandment, he observed it the next Sabbath. It wasn't long after Joseph Bates was first exposed to the Sabbath truth that he heard about a little company of Sabbath keepers up in the mountains of New Hampshire in a little town called Washington. The leader was Frederick Wheeler. Joseph Bates felt a burning desire to see these people and to talk to them about the faith. So he bought a ticket on a train, and after he had gone as far as the train would take him, he bought a ticket on a stage. And after he had gone as far as the stage could take him, he went the rest of the way on foot. And he arrived at the Wheelers' farmhouse late at night. The lights were out, and everyone was asleep. And he kept knocking. Eventually, Wheeler's 11-year-old son, George, overheard him and opened the door for him. That night, they came out, and they had a great discussion. The following day, George and the hired man went to the fields to work with Elder Wheeler and took Captain Bates with them. And they had a great discussion. That is what Adventists call the first conference meeting. Okay. After this, Bates, I said Wheeler? Bates. All right, sorry. After this, after the great disappointment, and from the prophecy of Daniel 8:14, they realized that the cleansing of the sanctuary was to begin in 1844 on the 22nd day of October. But it was not the sanctuary, the earth was not the sanctuary. Jesus began a cleansing work at the sanctuary in heaven. And in that sanctuary is where he is now. And when he has finished its cleansing, he will come to receive his people. And that is a doctrine that they believe and preach. After the great disappointment, Bates, along with others, Crozier, Edson, Han, and some other men, they got together and studied what went wrong. And then they realized that they had made a mistake in thinking that that the earth was the sanctuary. They met together in New Hampshire at the home of Hiram Edson to discuss the newfound doctrine of this heavenly sanctuary. At the end of it, they came to conclusion and they all agreed. Mr. Bates said he has something he has to tell the group, and he began to talk about the Sabbath day Sabbath. And he began to preach and talk about it. Most of them, Hiram Edson stood up and said, I have studied this already, and I'm rejoicing to hear this truth. The seventh day is the Sabbath. Crozier stood up and said, brethren, we have to be careful, stepping on planks that are not strong. This Sabbath truth is not necessary at this time. But the other brethren accepted, and Crozier, who never fully accepted the Sabbath, he kept it for a little while, and then he eventually stopped keeping it, and he stopped fellowshipping and worshiping with the other believers. Mr. Bates decided that he's going to write a tract on the Sabbath truth and send it around to the other groups around America and around the world, because he realized that when he can go to one place, he can only go to one place at a time. But a flyer or a pamphlet can go all around the world where he could not go. So he wrote this pamphlet and that book. At the beginning, remember, he had $11,000, and by the time he decided to write this book, he had no money. He only had 29 cents. His wife, who was a believer with him, but a bit slower than he was, she came one day into the room, and he had decided he's going to sit down in his room and he's going to write this tract on the Sabbath and send it around to everyone. He had to get it printed and everything, but he had no money. But he still decided he's going to write it. The Lord came to him and told him, you have to write this tract. His wife came in one day while he was starting to write, when he was writing, and she said, Joseph, I need some flour. And it's to finish the baking. And we have to buy some more food. And he said, okay, I'll get your flour. He left. And he went and he took the last 29 cents he had and he bought 4 pounds of flour. And came back home and gave her the flour. And she said, he put it in the kitchen. She was not there. And she came and she saw it. And she came out and she said, who bought the flour? He said, I went and I spent my last 29, he called it a shilling at that time, on the flour. And she started to cry. If you spent the last money we have no more money, what's going to happen? He said, the Lord will take care of it. And she said, you always say that, the Lord will take care of it. And she started to cry and she left the room. Sometimes we have men who have a work to do for the Lord, and that's why we as wives have to uphold their hand and not complain too much. You see what happened in the end. Eventually, he started to write, and then a strong impression came to him that he should go to the post office. There's a letter waiting for him. He got up and he left home. And when he arrived at the post office, the postmaster said, you have to give me 5 cents for the postage to get the letter. He said, I have no money. But what I want you to do for me is to open the envelope. Because the Lord has told me that there's something in there for me. Open the envelope and see what's in it. If there's no money in it, I won't take it because you had to pay for it in order to get the letter. The postmaster opened the envelope and looked inside, and there was $10 and a note. He took the $10, he paid the postmaster, he took the money. He went to the shop and bought some food and groceries, and he told the young man at the store, take these groceries to my house. When you get there, my wife will tell you they're not for her, but don't pay her any money. Just leave them on the step and go. And he left them and he went, and then he went down to the publishing area, and he gave them the papers he had about the Sabbath, and this tract was printed. Joseph Bates, when he first met Ellen G. White, did not believe that she was a prophet. And Ellen, when she met him, did not accept the Sabbath truth. So they did not accept it. She did not accept or could see the Sabbath truth at that time when she first met him. And he did not fully believe that he did not believe at all that she was a prophet, that she was getting visions from the Lord. So therefore they met together and they were studying whatever, and he had doubts in his mind. This girl, and no, did not believe it. And she thought the Sabbath was not necessary. One day they had a conference and Ellen went into vision. Now Joseph Bates, having been a captain in a ship, he knew all about astronomy and the stars and how to follow them in your ship to find where you're going and things like that. And he would read a lot about astronomy. Ellen went into vision and Joseph Bates was there. I feel this vision was given just for him. And in her vision, she started to talk about all the stars and astronomy and everything. And he knew she didn't know anything about astronomy because he had spoken to her before. She didn't have a clue. So now here she was in vision telling him all of these things. And when she was talking in vision, he would say, "Oh, she's describing Jupiter." And then she would talk again. He said, "Oh, she's describing Saturn." And then she'd talk about a great space in the sky that had these stars within it. And he said, "She's describing Orion." And he was all startled. And when she came out of vision, he said, "She is really of the Lord, and the Lord is giving her visions." As he wrote the track and everything, he spoke with Ellen some more. Eventually, Ellen came around. She understood the Sabbath truth, and she wholeheartedly accepted it. So you see, sometimes we may have differences among ourselves and may not understand something that someone else is saying, may not agree or whatever, but it's best to let the Lord work. And remember, Ellen went home and she would study for herself. So I think many of us are guilty of just listening to a presentation, getting up, making a comment or whatever, go home, don't study anything, come back and disagree again. So it's best to go home and study. And they came all together in one. Joseph Bates, a pioneer that the Lord used back then after the great disappointment, when many people were laughing at the people of God and calling them crazy and the foolish people and believing in a man. Today they laugh at us and say we believe in a woman. We have to hold strong and hold firm to the truths that we believe in. Study for yourself. Study as an individual. We'll not be saved in groups. We'll be saved as individuals. So remember the story of Joseph Bates, a man who did a great work for the Lord. And we now have to carry on that work that he did. And may the Lord bless us and keep us. And may we so surrender ourselves that we may do even a great work, as great a work as he did, or even greater. Thank you.
We're going to stand and sing number